Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
Welcome in to Take Command. You can watch us on the 106.7 The Fan and Team 980 YouTubes. Of course, subscribe, rate, review, wherever you get your audio. With Logan Paulsen, who played a decade in the NFL, I'm Grant Paulsen. Thank you for checking the show out. It means a lot to us. Logan, we're coming off of a Washington loss, a fourth straight setback, a third straight by at least 21 points, and in this case, a 24-point loss. We want to chew on what happened. You watched all the tape. I want to start with the offense and some of the issues they've been having. It's been broken in the run game the last month. What are you seeing from this offense as they try to get going?
Yeah, lots of stuff to talk through. And I think first off, let's talk about Seattle, I think a little bit and just give it some context. The defense was good, man. I came away after watching the film, obviously in the game, you're like, man, this team's pretty talented. They run around well, but the way they match, they play like a zone match concept. So there's times where you got the film cut on, and I've really very rarely see this, but they've just kind of taken their zone principles, kind of applied it to the hot map of the Commander's route concept that they're running, and there's nobody open. And so, I think we were talking post-game kind of as we were walking to the car about Jaden Daniels and, is he seeing it well? And I kind of came away saying, I think he's seeing it about as well as he could possibly see it. There's just not a lot of spots to go with the football. So that's one element. I think, why is that happening? I think people probably want to know. One, obviously the injuries at the receiver spot. You feel that stuff, right? It just takes guys a little bit longer to get into routes, a little bit longer to get to spots. So that's one element. I think the other thing too is the pass protection of the offensive line. And not that they're playing bad, but it's just if the offensive line wanted to elevate the skill position players, they would need to pass protect and hold on to their blocks for another 0.5 seconds. And there's times where they can't do it. So it's the pressure, the relatively quick pressure in some instances, coupled with the lack of less than ideal separation on the perimeter. And that's kind of the pass game in a nutshell, man. It's just not overly pretty.
The receiver issue makes a lot more sense, obviously, because you're down McLaurin and Noah Brown, and Debo's been on and off the field for the last few weeks. As far as the pass pro, they got their guys, right? It's Tunsil. They've chosen to go with Chris Paul at guard. You've got Tyler Biadasz, Sam Cosmi's back, and then the first-round pick Connerly at right tackle. Is that just Seattle's really good? I mean, we went into the game saying this is probably the best defensive front they played all year. Maybe from a personnel standpoint, I'd stack the Giants up there with them. But the way Seattle's been playing, the way these four guys have been rushing especially, they don't really have to blitz to get pressure. This is probably the biggest challenge. Do you just tip your cap there? Why so many issues? Daniels, according to Next Gen Stats, was pressured 50% of dropbacks, 60% in the second half, and they had all their tight ends and their linemen available.
Yeah, so I think some of it is obviously you got to give credit to Seattle. You talked about the personnel. I think that's huge. I think the scheme too on third down, I don't know if we talked about it extensively on the preview pod, but they do some really good stuff on third down. They don't blitz a lot in general, but on third down, their blitz packages are incredibly well designed. They put a ton of stress on, your slide, your man protection. They put stress on the back. So it is really, it's really challenging to beat them in those situations. And really that's true of any defense in the NFL. They're all kind of adopting these exotic, pressure packages on third down, third and long. So there is some credit that is to be given there, but I think there's some context given to the offensive line. Cosmi is getting his first reps with Connerly. So a lot of times on these ET, type stunts, there's just a little bit of miscommunication. They're on slightly different levels. And people say, well, why is that? They're professional athletes. And I will say that takes a ton of reps to get really good at, is building that relationship, building that identity as a guard tackle combination to kind of get that nonverbal communication to understand, hey, this is how I'm going to set versus this ET. This is where I expect you to be. And then I kind of thought, well, does that apply to Chris Paul? Because this entire offseason, he was the backup guard while Laramie Tunsil was starting. So they missed every single rep, during OTAs and minicamp because Chris Paul's with the twos. And then through training camp, they missed those reps as well. And so really the first time they started getting consistent reps together is when Chris Paul started, which week was that, Grant? Was that like week 3 or 4? I don't remember.
I was going to say, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in.
Yeah. So
it was after the Green Bay game, I think. So it would have been week 3.
Yeah, so they're still, as much as we want to say like Chris Paul's playing well and Laramie Tunsil's playing well individually, they're still building that chemistry. And I'm not saying that this is not an excuse, and they wouldn't want me to give them an excuse, but I'm just trying to give some context about how hard and how important that relationship is between the guard and tackle. Because people often just say, "Oh, 5 offensive linemen, they got to see it." I remember talking to Morgan Moses when he was here with Brandon Sheriff, and he said Brandon Sheriff has helped my career so much, because I know exactly how he's going to set. We see everything the same way. No one's going to get us on an ET. Any game, any blitz, we can communicate it kind of non-verbally because we've seen everything together. So I think, again, when you go individually and you say, well, like, what am I going to grade Cosme or Connerly or Biotish? Physically, you're like, this is pretty good. This is winning this one-on-one. Like, this is winning football. It's like sometimes when they have to gel in those moments on third down, that it gets a little bit challenging because they're not all seeing it exactly the same way. And I think a big reason for that is possibly that they haven't got a ton of reps together as of yet.
Some PFF data, and again, these numbers are not gospel, but I've always found them instructive to the pie that you're creating for information. They had Josh Connerly as having given up 3 pressures, the rest of the linemen 2 pressures, with the exception of Chris Paul, who they didn't assign any pressures allowed to in this game, which I found interesting. On Connerly, I always like to come back to this to kind of just take your temperature, Logan. When I watch him, I see a guy who's going to end up being an excellent right tackle. Like, my confidence in what he will eventually become has not wavered at all. And I know there have been some legit struggles early in the season, a little bit of a bump in the road here, maybe the last couple of weeks at times. It's a hard position. There's some tough matchups, but is that fair to say? I mean, do you feel the same way that like your confidence in him long term hasn't really changed? Like, this is part of it, no?
Yeah, my confidence has not wavered at all in him. No one's really talked to me about him, but I hear kind of some of the noise about him, and I have no issue with really how he's playing. This is, I mean, probably because this fits exactly with my expectation for him. I think he's getting better each and every week. I think he's learning each and every week. I think you see enough special from him in terms of movement skills, pulls, getting to the second level on stuff, working combinations. Like, the foot speed is so high level. And I think this is the other thing too. When I was doing his draft profile, every time you watched him, you're like, this guy has the ceiling, the profile to project to be a long-time pro in the NFL. He's 20. He was 20 when he got drafted, 21, whatever it is. And when you're around him, when you watch him play, he doesn't have that elite play strength yet. I think we talked about that maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. And so to me, this is a physical development as well as a mental development. And so in a year and a half, I think he's going to be an absolute stud. I think he's a good player now. And I think people who don't watch offensive line as consistently as like maybe you or I do, it seems jarring. Oh, 3 pressures, whatever. But that's a very common thing. Like, some of the best offensive linemen, like Amarius Mims, for example, I think is going to be an absolute stud for Cincinnati, went through a period where he was giving up a pressure like every 5 dropbacks. And that's just non-tenable. And then Joe Flacco gets in there. He's playing a lot better. He looks like the guy that drafted him at 16 overall, whatever it was. And so offensive line, it just the difference between college offensive line play and defensive line play to the NFL is I think one of, outside of quarterback, the most difficult hill to climb. So anytime they're like, offensive lineman's going to be starting, I'm like, great for that guy. He's obviously a stud. It's just going to take him some time to deal with the better athletes, deal with a more complicated scheme. And I think you're seeing some of that with Connerly now.
Yeah, and to that point, I think it's like corner in a sense where if you have one really bad play in a game, people assume you had a bad game. When there are times where there's 70 plays, or you might be blocking, in his case in this game, and almost 40 dropbacks or whatever that looks like, right? 30 plus dropbacks in a game, and you allow a couple of pressures and you have one really bad rep or whatever, and that's the one everyone remembers. Corner is the same way. If you do your job on almost every play, but you get torched for a touchdown in man on the outside, everyone's going to point to that all week long. And, you know, these are imperfect positions, and we ask for perfection. We're chasing ghosts a little bit in that way. But to the person at home that's sitting there going, wait a second, guys, that wasn't good enough. Collectively, yeah, as a unit, giving up 50% pressures and 60% and a half isn't going to work, and they got to go back to the drawing board. I want to circle back to Jaden Daniels and the unfortunate injury that he suffered. The elbow, we're still awaiting a timeline, but he's certainly going to miss an extensive amount of time. So there's been a lot made about the play call. Dan Quinn in his press conference talked about regretting having him in the game at that time, said, quote, "I missed it," end quote. Said that the plan was to not have Jaden run at all, but he should have thought more about the fact that Daniels is often going to, leave the pocket, scramble, whatever. They called an RPO there, Logan. You watched the play. So, what do you see when you watch that play as far as it getting to the point where Daniels is running when they were hoping that wasn't going to be the case?
Yeah, so I don't remember who the player was, and I don't know the exact read. So to me, it feels like the way it plays out, it feels like there's a zone read element to it. And obviously, I understand why, like when you go back and listen to Dan's comments and you watch it, that it is maybe more of a traditional RPO. But for me, like one of the things about an RPO is I like to read a coverage player. This is just how I coach it. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with what Cliff's doing here. It looks to me like they're reading the defensive end. So when you pull it, right, the concept's open, we got to throw the football. He's going to have to boot a little bit to kind of clear that defender. They're playing man coverage on the perimeter, which, again, we've talked about on this show a ton, is going to kill RPOs. So I think, to me, the reading of the end feels more zone readish to me in terms of what the result could possibly be. Kind of feels more like maybe triple option as opposed to straight zone read or straight RPO, kind of in this gray area in between. Go ahead.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yep.
So I think this is what you're getting at. But the end, for people that don't remember the player, didn't study it, free releases. There's nobody blocking this guy, right? And that seems like, is there a design where someone is supposed to have gotten hands on him or slowed him down, or is he free for the quarterback to make miss? Because Jaden makes this ridiculous play to basically get away from this guy. Now everyone says, okay, well, if you just reset there and throw to Debo, he's open. There's a split second where maybe that could happen. That's a tough ask. I mean, he's now getting into an athletic position. So, is the free release supposed to happen? And if that's the case, what is the desired outcome on that play when he comes free towards Jaden?
Yeah, so I guess that's what I'm trying to say is, to me, that's why it feels, I would categorize that in my mind as more of a zone read element, because on an RPO, at least the way I would coach it, and again, zone read, RPO, it's a language kind of faux pas here. It doesn't really matter what you want to characterize that. The end's free. It looks like he's reading the end. He's pulling the football as the end closes to the back, right? Great play by the end, actually, kind of showing perpendicular shoulders, gets the parallel shoulders. Jaden makes a great play. And then the issue is on the perimeter, right? We're in man coverage. So there's really no spot for him to throw the football necessarily once we've kind of gotten past the defensive end. That's why I'm saying it felt to me more like a triple. So what I mean by triple is we're reading the end, so there's a zone read element. And then as I get to the perimeter, if that hook player attacks the quarterback, then someone in the route combination should be open. So that's why it's like kind of modern triple option. So instead of dive pitch, it's now dive perimeter, and now I can throw the football. The Kansas City Chiefs run a ton of it. I think a couple of years ago, 2022, 2023, that's the definitive play that seals the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl versus the 49ers. The Philadelphia Eagles ran a ton of that when Ron was here. I want to say in 2021, 2022. So that's where to me, is it a true RPO? By definition, it doesn't feel that way to me, because if it was, then we'd kind of man the guys there on the backside. The guard tackle would man that, and then we'd read an off-ball player. However, in the goal line, you're going to get different front spacing. Maybe it changes the rules of how they kind of allocate who's free, who's not, and so that's where I kind of came down on it. It's yes, I understand why you're calling it an RPO, quote unquote, but because we're reading the end, the quarterback has to make some type of running decision here, and I think that's where I kind of would just say I would characterize it as something different, but I understand why Dan would call it an RPO.
I also like the use of triple option, because we think of Eric Crouch at Nebraska, right, like old school, but there are quite literally, in your point, 3 options there. All right, let's get to the run game, because as they move forward without Jaden Daniels for a extended period of time, possibly, Marcus Mariota is going to need help from this run game, which has not performed to the same level over the last 4 contests. In fact, Washington has now not gained 4 yards per carry from running backs over the last month. So specific to the run game, where are we at on the production, what you're seeing from the backs, And what's changed here?
Yeah, like we talked about with the coverage stuff, I think coming into this game, the more people that I talked to and the more film I watched, I think it was like, oh yeah, Seattle, they play light boxes. We're going to be awesome. This is going to be easy to run the football. But then you just watch the individual matchups. You watch Murphy, you watch Williams, and you watch their edge guys, and you're like, actually, no one seems to be able to win one-on-one combinations versus these guys. The defensive coordinator does a good job of kind of throwing these little, nothing like it wasn't not these huge dramatic line shifts, but enough where, you put your guy in a position where he can beat a one-on-one block. Those guys traditionally have beat one-on-one blocks. So this really felt like unlike Kansas City, where it's like awesome run fits. Everyone's in their spot. We're spilling it back to the unblocked guy. This felt a little bit more like just a competitive war of one-on-one matchups. And I think, again, McDonald did enough good stuff where you're just shifting a guy, a little bit of a line stunt, peeling a combination, moving a guy who has no help. He's got to spin back on something. It gets muddy in the hole. The back does a good job kind of trying to stay skinny. We get 3. So kudos to Seattle for that schematic element and for having good personnel in the defensive front. The problem is, I think fans want to hear, what do you do about it? How do you handle these things moving forward? And it is hard. Like, I'm trying to think of a good way to characterize it. So just imagine you've got your 5 offensive linemen, right? And you've got a guy over the guard and a guy over the guard. Ideally, you would just say, hey, we're going to double this team. But like if we're running to the right, for example, the tackle and the backside guard would double team, and the center and the front side guard would double team, and we would be ready to rock and roll. The problem is, like, when you make those declarative combinations and then you move one piece, is now let's say we're at the front side tackle on that center guard combination. That tackle is stunting to the center, and the center has no inside help because the backside guard's in a combination. So now you get a free runner in the hole because the linebacker's spilling down very quickly. And those types of things are very hard, and they take a lot of different tools to fix. And so if we're going to be seeing, the Commanders are going to be seeing more of this subtle run stunt movement on first and second down, they need to kind of, I think, get in their bag a little bit. Bobby Johnson needs to look at this and say, we're going to see this more. Like, this is going to be something we're seeing. And
is there a theme between the weeks? I remember after, the Cowboys game, we talked about, the Bears did this thing they hadn't really seen necessarily coming out of their bye, right? And then the Cowboys, do it differently. Like, it's been 4 games of the struggles. I know each team is different. Is there a reoccurring theme with how they're being defended? It sounds like this was unique, and each one's been kind of a different plan, and the result has just been frustratingly similar. Is that fair?
I think that's probably fair. The Cowboys and the Bears game felt really similar to me in terms of like these big line stunts, pressures. We're going crazy. Kansas City just kind of played you straight up and said, we're good. We feel like we fit runs well. Let's get after it.
And honestly, Kansas City, by the way, and certainly Seattle, those are really good run stuffing teams. Like, the stunner with the Bears was they'd been really bad at it. They got a piece or two back up front, had a bye week to prepare. The Cowboys had been as bad as there was in the league at it. Played an inspired game, took Chicago's blueprint a little bit, figured something out. The Chiefs were going to be good at it because that's what they do. And the Seahawks were the number 1 run defense in the NFL. So I'm not making excuses. Like, the last 2 weeks have been more understandable for me than the first 2 weeks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it makes sense. And I actually think that they ran the ball specifically in like at the end of the second quarter, going to the third quarter, pretty effectively, right? And effectively is different than well, right? We're able to get first downs. We're able to get positive runs. We're able to kind of find creases. And that's what this was going to be. Like, that, this was going to be an absolute, like, slobber knocker. So a good example of this is Chris Ball, Laramie Tunsil have had some of the best, like, double team combination blocks I've seen all season from any team in the NFL. They've been outstanding. They have a double team on Leonard Williams. They create good movement. Leonard Williams kind of attacks Chris Ball's outside shoulder, pulls into Laramie Tunsil, and they get about 2 yards of movement. But instead of like the 5 yards of movement they've been getting, it's a little bit tighter. John Bates has to work up to the linebacker who sheds hard outside. He's connected, but the hole, instead of being this big, which is about 2.5 feet, is now 6 inches. So Bill Krosky Merritt has to cut, kind of dive forward, and it's a 3.5 yard gain. And when you play good defenses with good defensive personnel that use their hands, fit runs well, like they just stress you in a way. And in the same way that coverage structure can stress a quarterback, this stresses the offensive line. So again, that's why I want to make sure that we do give credit to Seattle because they did a good job. But I do think moving forward, if we're going to see all this movement in the front, we have to kind of, the Commanders have to think about, hey, is there maybe a call where it's a 3-man combination instead of a 2-man combination? And people say, yeah, let's just do that. The problem is when you go to a 3-man combination, the double team's not as good because people are playing soft and kind of worried with eyes not to their work. And so you don't want to do that if you're trying to create movement, and on a gap scheme run, you're trying to create movement, but you're also trying to eliminate penetration. So you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, and you just got to figure out what the best solution is for your guys that week. And that's why, Bobby Johnson makes a lot of money. And I think he's done an excellent job with this group overall. But these are the tough decisions that a run game coordinator and an offensive line coach would have to make moving forward if we're going to continue to see some of this stuff.
Take command. Logan Paulsen got paid to open up these holes over the years. I'm Grant Paulsen. So what about Bill? I mean, early in the year, he was cooking 6.5 yards against the Falcons, 8 yards per carry against the Chargers. Last 3 weeks, it's 3 yards per carry. Last 4 weeks, it's right around 3. Do you still see the same vision, cutting, running from him? It's obviously a larger issue, but what are you seeing from Bill specifically?
Yeah, I think he looks good, man. I think he looks about as good as he can look. Like, it's just different. You're not, like I said, you're not murdering people the same way you were. Like, there were times where I was watching the offensive line against Atlanta, against the New York Giants, and I was kind of in my mind, I was like, is this the best offensive line in the NFL? Because they are killing people. And obviously that's regressed a little bit in terms of what they've seen, what they've been able to do in terms of moving people off the spot. So I think a good example of this is like the LA Chargers. Dominique Hampton goes out, he's having a good year, and then Kamani Vidal comes in and is rushing for 6 yards a carry. The running back position specifically is so correlated to offensive line efficiency. So you play Kansas City, they're great at stuff and runs. You're playing Seattle, they're the number 1 rushing defense. It's going to be harder to find and create space as a back because the offensive line is going to have more difficult matchups across the board. So I look at that and I still see the movement skills. I still see the vision. It's just tighter and the margin for error is smaller. And when you're playing good teams, that's what they're going to do to you. So there was a big call, we got to run the football more. We got to pound the football. Running the football in the NFL versus teams that know what they're doing is extremely difficult. It's very hard. And so that's why it's a big point is like, it's got to be complementary. We got to kind of pass, play action, create some space with formation, whatever it is, because if you just say, hey, let's line up in 22 personnel and jam the ball into your face, that just doesn't work in the NFL. It'll work in college. It'll work in high school, not so much in the NFL. So again, this is a hard thing. It's putting the backs in tough spots, putting the O-line in tough spots. But I think we got a smart coaching staff. I think they'll figure it out.
The run game, by the way, is still number 3 in the NFL right now for Washington in terms of yards per play at 5.08. Some of that is the excellence of the rushing of the quarterback position, but they've had a ton of success early in the year harvesting their nuts in the ground with backs and receivers as well. And so, I mean, this has been a very effective run game, but you're coming up on now basically half of the sample where they're trying to get right and trying to do this at a higher level. Lastly, before we move over to the defense, I wanted to talk about the injury to Luke McCaffrey, broken collarbone, best kick returner in the league, was leading the NFL in returns. This stinks. I mean, second year he was coming on, not only in the special teams capacity, but he had made some plays as a receiver. I thought the Chiefs game, even though there wasn't the big flashy 50-yard catch that he had against the Chargers, or it wasn't the big touchdowns that he's caught against other teams, like that was a pretty complete receiver effort. 3 targets, 3 catches, toe tap on the sideline. And now he's out for the remainder of the year at a position where they're already lacking depth. Just your thoughts on moving on without him.
It's just tough, man. It's just because, again, maybe his impact on offense wasn't this dramatic 5 catches, 85-yard type situation, but his impact on the team in terms of special teams was huge. Like, think about some of these games we've been our starting field position has been at the 45-yard line multiple times in a game. That makes it so much easier for the offense to be successful. And I think you see Jalen Lane has done some good things this year as a return man. Obviously has the explosive return versus the Las Vegas Raiders, but is still growing as a kick returner and fumbles the football, muffs the one the week prior. And I think it is a significant drop off from Luke, who's been incredibly consistent, to Jalen Lane. And again, like, those are the things that you don't want to think about. It's next man up, but if it's next man up in multitudes of spots, you see the effect of that. And here's another guy that the quarterbacks, Mariota and Jaden, have built relationships and built rapport with, and he's not in the lineup anymore. And so we talked about the relationships and the chemistry with the offensive line. How important is that for a quarterback to just trust that you're going to be in the right spot? And he's no longer out there. And I will say this about Luke, we've talked about him growing as a receiver. You could trust him to know and be where he's supposed to be. And now that element's gone. So it's just incredibly hard for the team, for the offense, for Luke, and it's hard for the coaching staff, man. Like, I really don't know what you do with some of these injuries and how they're piling up.
Yeah, this offense has enough injuries now where you're getting to a point where you're kind of coaching around that more than you're sometimes coaching for your opponent. Yeah. And when that's the case, that gets really, really hard. All right, we'll flip over to the defense next. The Commanders getting ready for the Lions, going to be one of their toughest challenges of the season. And yet they got injuries to deal with on that side of the ball and another poor performance to try to break down. We'll do that next on Take Command. Welcome back to Take Command. He's Logan Paulsen. I'm Grant Paulsen. Watch us on YouTube, 1067 The Fan, Team 980. Listen to us wherever you get your audio. Subscribe, rate, review. Please send the pod to a friend or two this week. That would help us. That would be awesome. Let them know that we do this before and after every single game, 3 episodes a week. Logan, defensively, as we break the tape down, I'm just going to give some numbers, and then you can kind of go into what you saw. It was not pretty. Certainly in the first half, there was a point where they're down 28-0. They give up 31 points in the half for a first time in a couple of years. And Sam Darnold in the game, just 3 incompletions, 4 touchdowns. A lot of people will say, oh, they should have tried this, they should have done this. It really did not matter what they were in. I mean, he just picked them apart. Against man coverage, 8 of 10 for 127 and 3. Against zone coverage, 13 of 14 for over 200 yards and a touchdown. What'd you see?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I don't think the numbers give you an accurate picture of the game. I think those numbers give you exactly what happens. Like, when you cut the film on, you're like, it's funny because I remember the broadcast. I take notes while Fletch is talking, and he's like, oh, we need to get into more zone, or we need to get more man. And then you're watching, you're like, okay, they're in zone here, but we can't get any pressure. So Sam Darnold hits this deep dig to Jackson Smith and Jigba. Oh, we're in man coverage, but it's a bunch, and we bust it, and we can't get any pressure, and we get a big explosive play. And it just, I think just like we talked about with the receivers, I think you feel the depth issues on the defensive line badly. Like, I think you're feeling some of that, the guys on the edge and some of the guys on they can't create a rush with 4 the way that I think you were hoping at some point this year. And I think people say, oh,
by the way, at the beginning of the year, they were top 3 in the NFL at generating pass rush with 4 for the first quarter or so of the season, when you had Armstrong, Kinlaw, Payne, the collection. Wise on the other side is not a great pass rusher, but is a big body that you got to account for, right? And go ahead, yeah.
Sorry, I think the thing with Wise that I was just wanted to bring up is he wasn't going to win quickly, but the thing he did really well was compress pockets. And so, like, you talk about some of these bigger rushers, like there's some guys around the league that come to mind that can they're not going to create a quick win, but they can push the tackle back. That constriction allows other people to make plays. Like, so there was a play last night where Jacob Martin won on the rush, but the pocket is vast, right? We're not getting enough push, and Sam Darnold's able to step up and flick the ball to the back for a completion. There ends up being a holding on the play. But that type of stuff, the lack of constriction in the pocket, you're starting to feel that too. Because even when guys win, there's too much space. The quarterback has too much space to navigate and kind of get to where he's got to get. So that's got to be, I would imagine, just extremely frustrating for Joe Wood Jr. to deal with, because you can't do what you wanted to do. And I don't know if we talked about this with the offense, but I was talking to Fletch about this and Smoot and some other people over the course of the weekend, or on yesterday, Monday. And you came in thinking that we were going to be able to play a lot of man coverage and win with 5 as a rush team. And all of a sudden that dream and that vision is no longer there. So it's going to take I think a lot of self-reflection and understanding where the roster's at the moment to say, well, what can we do now? Who can we be now? And that's going to be really tough to deal with, and I think that's what I feel the most. And just kind of, when you look at good defenses, so look at Seattle, I think it's a good example. Watching the Bills versus Kansas City, the rush, there are times where you're watching the coverage and guys are open, but the quarterback can't get the ball there. Even with the Commanders against Seattle, I'm like, oh man, this is the throw, but there's a dude literally 6 inches from Jane Daniels' face. He's got to make a Houdini move to get out of there, and he's running for his life. And I'm like, we won that down, but we lost because the rush covered it up in the back end. And I think right now you're not getting any kind of insulation as a coordinator from these guys on the defensive line. And it's not to say that they're not playing hard. It's not to say that they're not doing some good things. Like, you see flashes from Kinlaw, flashes from Payne. I think even Jalen Holmes does some stuff on the edge that I'm like, okay, we can work with this. He's going to help this team out long term. We mentioned Jacob Martin with an excellent run stop in the third quarter, like to start that off, just killing the tackle or the tight end. I forget who it was, but great job by him. It's not consistent enough across the board. And I think that's the thing that's really frustrating. And when you lose guys like Dietrich, who that's their thing. On first down, I'm going to kill whoever's in front of me in the run game. And you just lose that consistency. It becomes very, very challenging for the coordinator.
Yeah, Martin had 15 pressures over the last couple of games, so he's doing something right. But they need more, not just from him, but from everyone in terms of getting to the quarterback. Joe Witt is leaving the booth where he normally calls plays from, and he's coming down to the sideline. Dan Quinn announced that yesterday in his Monday press conference. He thinks this is going to be a helpful change and a significant change. What do you make of that?
So I've been on offenses that have done it both ways. And I will say, as a player, I always preferred the coordinator on the sideline. That's personal preference, right? And because if there's an issue, the guy that has created the painting, the guy that has created the symphony of this defense, the vision, the rules, whatever it is there. So if there's a question, it's not phone call, yak with your position coach. It's, I can go directly to you and be like, Coach, we have a 6 technique on this, but he's actually playing out. I don't know if this outside zone run is going to be good. Not that I would ever say that to Kyle, but you get what I'm saying. The communication is immediate one-to-one. If Kyle has a question, he comes up to me right now and says, hey, Logan, what did he do on that last play? And you say, this is what he did, Coach. And he says, great, and walks away. It gives you the immediate feedback of the entire sideline right now. So I know people.
If they're not down there, you're going to someone who's then Motorola headsetting that up to them, essentially.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And so you lose you lose the ability to communicate with that guy a little bit. And again, it's helpful when you're up in the box and you can see the coverages, you can see this. It also gives you a feel for the sideline. Like, what's the energy like? What's the motivation like? What's the morale? Maybe that's the word I'm looking for there. So I do think that there is a lot of benefit to it, and I always appreciated it. So when they said he's coming down, I think there are some things they can do. Like, so for example, when you're walking the sideline, I'm walking by, like the defensive backs, and they're talking to each other about a coverage, and the DB coach comes by and he's talking to them, and then the assistant comes by and they're talking. Imagine if Joe Witt Jr. is in that conversation right now, talking to the guys, seeing their expression, understanding the limitations that they're having in the moment. I think it can be really, really helpful. We'll see what happens. But again, as a player, I always preferred that because the feedback was real time and the emotion of the sideline is real time also.
So that context is actually really helpful. And I'll be honest, I was somewhat cynical when I heard this, and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, you're moving them down from the box, everything's fixed. I actually like what you're selling and saying as a player. Like, that actually makes a lot of sense. So then someone sitting at home would go, well, why not do this earlier? Or why isn't he down there all the time? So those two very different questions, right? He may have a preference. He may see more up top, whatever. But they have been trying to find answers. And for a month, it's been really, really rough. Like, why not do this 2 weeks ago if it could be a huge boost? Yeah,
I think, there are advantages to being in the box. Like, I'm going to be totally honest. Like, so I'm on the sideline. So this is really an easy way to talk about it. So I'm on the sideline for the broadcast. I can't see anything Like I can see like whatever is right in front of my eyes, right? But oftentimes I have to ask Fletch or Bram what happened on the play in terms of coverage structure because I can't see it, right? Or what the formation is. Like where was that guy? How tight was the split? When you're in the box, you can see it all, right? There's no referral. I can see the personnel. I can have that communication with the guy that's doing the personnel stuff. I can kind of see the position on the field. I can see the hash mark easier. All that stuff is way easier, like mechanically from the box. So when the coordinator's like, I prefer to be in the box, it's because it makes the technical stuff in terms of the things you need to know in terms of calling plays easier. So for example, like if I'm an offensive coordinator, hash mark, yard line, first down, or like what down is it, down in distance, all those things, it's hard. It's really hard to see from the sideline. In the box, it's a cakewalk, right? So it makes it much easier to call from that standpoint, I think. But again, I think the communication is important from the sideline. So to me, if you're taking him out of a situation where he's really comfortable and he can see all those things and, get the calls where he needs to get it, like that's one thing. But I do, again, like I said, I think the communication is important.
And that's what they're prioritizing, obviously. They've talked about communication for weeks. They've talked about, speeding up the play by kind of putting less on everybody's plate. So maybe that's the focus and the emphasis here more than the comfort of some of the things he might see. But I tell you, communication gets that much more important now because, as you said, he's relying upon being told things. Like the only way that this gets better is what you're referencing, which is you're going over there and saying, here's what I'm seeing, here's what they're doing, and expediting that process. So it sounds like you're giving in some areas, you're taking in others, but we'll see if this helps them at all. I'm a big proponent of like calling the team meeting before you play the worst team. I'm a big proponent of like the players only meeting before you're favored by 10 points. They're making a significant adjustment here going into a Lions game against a really Detroit offense with their personnel. So, I mean, if people are going to just watch this game and be like, let's see if the change worked, I don't know if that's the best way to do it.
That's the best marker, right?
He's going to have a better view of Jared Goff and Jahmyr Gibbs, I guess, from the sideline. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think what's interesting, and we'll talk about this on the preview show. Like I love the Detroit Lions. I love everything about them. Love the mindset. They are not quite as efficient as they've been in years past from an offensive standpoint, and defensively, same thing. I think I'd have to look. PFF does their metrics a little bit different, but they're like 23rd in the league in terms of offensive efficiency, and they have this balloon game where they absolutely murdered the Bears, which is elevating all their statistics. So if you remove that game, they're like a bottom 7 offense, which is pretty crazy for them. But again, Jared Goff is dealing, and they're still really explosive. I'm not saying that they're going to come in and just roll over for us, but I think that was interesting.
Yeah, very, very interesting. We'll get to that on the preview pod for sure. Their offensive ranking in yards per play is back end top 10, 9th. But I think you're right. If you take that Bears game out of that, I think they're much closer to right smack dab in the middle, even in yards per play this year, which considering
yards per play makes sense because they are explosive as all outdoors. But in terms of like some of those efficiency metrics, you're like, this doesn't feel like the Detroit Lions last year, which is the number 1 offense in the league, obviously.
Totally. Yeah. And I think they've done a good job without Ben Johnson, but you're going to miss him some. All right. We'll get to the Lions later in the week. So continuing to break down the defensive play, though, we talked about the significant injury, broken collarbone of Luke McCaffrey, torn ACL for Marshawn Lattimore out for the rest of the year. You hate this, right? Not only is this a really bad injury and it's tough to come back from and be yourself at that position at that age, but this is also a guy that has been maligned, has been a bit of a punching bag, has been taking heat all year long. And, after all the negativity is now done for the year, it's just a bad situation for everybody. But your thoughts on moving on without Lattimore, who, whatever fans were saying, this was the guy that they had covering half the field and that they felt best about at corner.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of, I know fans are probably not, like it was, dude, him walking off the field after he tore his knee up was brutal. The way the fans got after him, I love fans, but I feel like they lose so much perspective at times.
I didn't even notice or see or hear about this. He was getting yelled at during that.
Yeah, he was, as he's walking off the field, they were on him, and I was just like, "Are you guys for real right now? Like, this guy's going to the locker room because he's banged up." And anyway, that's this conversation for another day. But I'm not a Marshawn Lattimore apologist or anything like that, but I do think people undervalue some of the stuff that he was doing really well, which is playing physical at the line of scrimmage. He tackles well. He just has like this "I'm not going to turn it down" mentality, which is really valuable when you're going up against the number one receiver. And now you've lost this element to your defense, and you've got to play Mike Sanderson on the perimeter, Jones on the perimeter, who are much different physically than Marshawn in terms of how they tackle, in terms of how they press, in terms of how they jam receivers. And again, people say he's jamming receivers, getting all these PIs. Part of me, I like that he's that aggressive. I like that he's forcing referees to make those calls. And again, is he a perfect player? No. I'm not here to say that he played perfectly this season or he's a top 10 corner or anything like that. But I like the mentality that he brought to the position, and I like the mentality that he brought to the defense. And now you're going to lose that. And so I'm kind of concerned is the wrong word, maybe curious, is how you replace the mentality that he was bringing. And I'm not sure there's a good answer to it.
The path forward at corner for me needs to be Sanders still back on the boundary. And I want to get your thoughts on this. Mikey played at a very high level last year, was playing outside. This is kind of like a new rookie year for him, back in a new position in the nickel. It has not gone quite as well anecdotally, although he does have 3 interceptions now, so he's made plays. He's got 3 of their 5 picks. But, they doubled JSN at one point, and then he was in man and got beat for a touchdown. That's going to happen, but there have been a lot of plays like that this year. Also, getting to see 31, Jones, back out there and playing. I don't know if him on the boundary is better than Sanders still out there. So that's what I would do. What would you do?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for you. I think like playing nickel in the NFL is impossible. I don't know how people do it, to be quite honest with you. It just seems like impossible. Like the run fit responsibilities, the coverage responsibilities, the grass you got to defend.
Is it the second hardest position to quarterback?
I mean, I think the way teams are attacking it now, maybe. Like I think I'm always a big believer offensive line's really hard, but it's the way teams attack a nickel, it's got to be close, man. It's definitely like people talk about corner being hard. Like I think I think that's a distant second to playing nickel. So I don't know if I want to move Mikey from the spot because he's got all those reps there. And I think he's doing maybe not a great job, but he's doing a good job and he's turning the football over. So maybe I want to leave him there and just let him be that guy and put Jones on the perimeter because I don't want to move 2 spots when I can just move 1, I think is what I'm thinking here. But I'm not at practice. I got to see how they'd be doing and how they're handling the responsibilities and that. Yeah. So really, I don't want to move 2 positions if I don't have to. But if Mikey gives you the best shot on the outside, let's do that and put Jones in at the slot.
They've got Detroit coming up. We're going to do our preview pod. I don't necessarily want to think specifically about them, but just in terms of kind of the 10,000-foot view of this defense, identity right now. Like, what are they doing well? What can they kind of lean into to try to fix this? Because numbers-wise, it's ugly, and I know people watch the games and they hate what they see, but like, there's a lot of plays, and you watch the tape. I mean, there's got to be things that they're doing at a level that maybe Joe Witt can say, all right, here's home plate for us. Let's get to this more often.
Yeah, I think you see some flashes from guys like Goldman has a TFL. Sheldon Day, I thought, had a really good game, sneaky good game, and so getting those guys in on first and second down, guys that are going to do and be where they're supposed to be in run fits, I think that's something I would just say, like, reward that opportunity, And I think they have done some good stuff coverage-wise in the back end, but it hasn't come to fruition because we haven't been able to get pressure. So what I would say is if I was Joe Witt Jr., and again, this is super high level, and there's, me saying this is the easy part. The technical execution of it is hard. I would just say, can we clean up the run fits as much as possible? Clean it up, and let's see if we can get into more third downs where I do think Joe Witt Jr. does a good job creating pressure, even when guys are banged up. Like when we can blitz Frankie, when we can blitz Bobby, we can do some of these different nickel pressures, sim pressures. Like we need to be in third and long more. And so the thing I look at is like, can we be better on first down? And there are times in this game where you see them effectively manage first down, but can we do that more consistently would be my question. Let's lean into the details, I think is what I would say. Let's lean into the details. Let's see if we can get into better positions for the defense. So like in the game, for example, there's a 1st and 25. That should be a win for the defense, right? But they convert, they end up going down and score. When we get those moments, we have to lock in and make those moments happen. So what I'd say is lean into the details. Let's see if we can uptick our execution on first down a little bit. Let's see if we can just slightly tilt the deck statistically in our favor in a 3rd and 8 or a 3rd and 9. And when it is tilted that way, let's go all in and see if we can make a play.
And it's not an injury, but one more vacancy here at edge. Frankie Louvu's not going to play this week. He was
crazy.
Suspended 1 game for 3 hip drop tackles. The league, I guess, has addressed this with him a couple of times. He's been fined. It's a 3 strikes you're out policy. So after his 3rd hip drop tackle this week, he's going to miss a game. He's now an edge. I mean, they've been playing McGee at linebacker with Bobby Wagner. So it's no Dorrance Armstrong. It's no Dietrich Wise. It's no JJB. And now you've got Louvu basically opposite some version of like Jacob Martin and Von Miller. And now you're out him as well. Plus what he does at the linebacking spot. Huge loss for them, even though it's only 1 game.
It is only 1 game, which I guess is good. But when I got that news, I was like, this is the craziest season of all time for this type of stuff. It's got to be. I mean, I haven't covered the team as long as you, but there are more injuries. This is the craziest suspension. This is probably the first one like this year, I would assume. And it's happening against a game in a game where you got to kind of right the ship, play good football. One of your emotional leaders isn't going to be out there, and you're like, cool. So now all these fans that wanted to see some of these rookie linebackers play, you're going to get that opportunity. And again, like it's going to feel a little bit different not having Frankie out there, but not having Marshawn, not having Frankie, not having Williams. What's his name? The safety that they got from New Orleans.
Will Harris.
Will Harris. I just don't. It's getting comical, and that where you're like, how do you overcome all of these vacancies?
You're an offensive player. I want to go back to the hip drop thing. What do you make of a 1-game suspension for those 3 tackles? They say it's as bad as tackle as you can do, and it's violent and leads to injuries. And I'm sure it's something as a player you hated and wanted out of the game. But man, a 1-game suspension. Now he's had his chances. It sounds like they've talked to him. 3 strikes, you're out. The rules are the rules. Are you surprised that we're at a place in the league where you're talking about suspensions, not for like helmet to helmet contact, but just like kind of jumping and pulling a guy down from behind?
Yeah, I mean, I've been hip drop tackled a few times in my career. A bigger guy, like that's the way that guys chose to get me down. And it is a little scary, but at the time it was like up to you to protect yourself a little bit as the runner, So I see some of the, like, I'm trying to think back, and I went back and watched some of Frankie's tackles last night, and I'm like, maybe they're calling this a hip drop, but he's fighting for his life here to get this guy on the ground. And like, he's got to be aware, like, oh, I can't hip drop this guy. Like he's literally just fighting to get him on the ground. So I don't know. I'm a big player safety advocate. I want parents of young kids to know that the NFL and college and high schools are thinking about their child's safety. I want the sport to continue to grow. But this one's weird. It would have been nice if they were like, hey, Frankie, you've been warned. This is a hip drop tackle. This is a hip drop. So that it doesn't feel so crazy when he gets suspended for a game. Like I think
I'd imagine but we don't know about it in the past, right? Because he gets fined. So I'm assuming in that letter in his locker, it says, hey, 1 strike, you got 2 more to play with. Hey, 2 strikes. And the last 2 are the last 2 weeks, apparently. The Chiefs game last week was number 2, and then this one was number 3. What I thought about when I saw that was, I don't want to say I was killing him. I think I'm pretty respectful and understand how hard the game is. But I was, as an analyst, talking about how many tackles he had missed early in the season. Because Frankie Louvu really struggled to tackle at the start of the year. And I'm going, bro, you got to get these guys. This was not a problem last year. And here in his mind, he's missing tackles, and now he's making tackles. We said this has gone away. You look at the PFF missed tackle numbers. He's been tackling. So it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't in a sense. But I get it. It's got to be clean. They don't want the hip drop tackle. They're evaluating this as, illegal. And so he's suspended. But that was the first thing I went to, was like, here I was saying, dude, you got to tackle people, and now he's getting suspended for tackling people.
I think you kind of hit on something really, really kind of funny there, something nice there, is everyone was getting on him for not wrapping up, and now he's wrapping up and he's finishing tackles, and he's getting this is a byproduct of that, I think, to a certain extent. So I don't know. I feel bad for Frankie. You know, I think he's been playing better. I think he's been playing well, actually. So it's tough that he's not going to be here against Detroit, obviously, because of this.
Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen, before and after every Commanders game. We do our film review looking back after Logan watches the tape. Then we do our film review looking ahead to the opponent. And then as soon as the game ends, we give you a live YouTube episode. So make sure you come back for that on game days, including this Sunday after Detroit. Logan, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention your shirt. I can't quite see it all, so you got to pull it down for me, but it seems like very nerdy, possibly. It says, "You matter unless you multiply yourself by the speed of light, then you energy." So that's you want to go ahead and work that one out for me? What does that mean?
MC squared. So energy equals mass times C, which is the speed of light squared, and that's that Albert Einstein guy came up with that. So, so obviously when you are matter, unless you multiply yourself by C, which is the speed of light, and then you become energy. You got it?
Clear. I mean, clear. Where do I get one of those shirts? Well, I'm sure there's a long line of people trying to get their hands on it.
My old man is literally a rocket scientist who graduated from MIT with almost a damn near a doctorate in mathematics. So this is the type of shirt my dad will get you, just to make sure that you're still locked in on what old Albert Einstein was talking about for a little bit, Is
that a gift from Papa Paulsen?
Yeah, well, probably my mom. You know what I'm saying? Like, mom buys the gift,
That's incredible.
Gifts. Yeah.
If you got any more of those laying around, send it my way. Yeah, can you imagine going to your dad as a rocket scientist and telling him you want to go bang heads with people at the line of scrimmage in the National Football League?
There are times where I think I've done this bit before, but like my dad is a rocket scientist. My uncle, who just recently passed away, was a lawyer. My aunt was a congresswoman in Boston. My mom's dad was a doctor who graduated from Harvard. So like I'm kind of this like knuckle dragon when we go to these family gatherings. It's not like, oh my gosh, look at this bright young lad. It's like, this is the one that chose to brutalize his body for 10 years in the NFL.
It's wild. All right, take command every single week. Come on back. Keep on enjoying the show. We'll be here for you, breaking it all down. Win, lose, or draw the rest of the year. Big thanks to our producer, Evan, who had his work cut out for him today. And for Logan, I'm Grant saying so long.